Hey guys, what is up? This is going to be a very special video slash audio podcast. Just kind of a quick one, but one that I think is important. Right now, with the Venom movie out and a real renewed interest in the character, not only movies, but also a renaissance of the character in comics with some of the best Venom books ever coming out currently, I thought this would be a very good time to look at what I believe are some of the greatest Venom stories. Now, contrary to popular belief, Venom does have some really great stories. Although, I will say the obvious thing is in the 90s especially, Venom was just a really cool character that some writers and some people just wanted to write him as a cool, angsty 90s hero in the veins of Lobo, the Max, things like that. So there are a lot of Venom stories that, although have their moments, stuff like The Madness or Funeral Pyre, that have some cool moments in them, I wouldn't put on the greatest, because even if they're the nugget of greatness, there's a lot of very, very hard to get through 90s moments. So for this list, I'm going to mostly focus on what I truly do believe are some of the greatest. And there won't be any real order. I'm just going to kind of list them off and tell you a little bit about them. And hopefully, if you weren't aware of them, make you aware of them. The greatest place to start is, of course, where Venom really kicked off. Amazing Spider-Man 300, a little bit 299. There's, of course, backstory that you can go into from beforehand with Spidey getting the black suit and stuff, but Amazing Spider-Man 300 still holds up extremely well. And going a little bit further, Amazing Spider-Man 315, 16, and 17, kind of continuing the story of Venom, his return in the Amazing Spider-Man series, that story of kind of the birth of Venom, the origin of Eddie Brock becoming Venom, and his first real attacks on Spider-Man, they still hold up surprisingly well. Even today, you go back and read them, there are moments in those books that I think actually hold weight now. I think we forget sometimes that, yes, even though some of those books that came out in the 80s and 90s, even though some of those books maybe relied a little bit too much on just straight up gore and sex and violence of the visual appeal, this kind of predates and is in a lot of ways is the origins of a lot of it, especially with Todd McFarlane going on to do things like Spawn and Venom, not so much being the blueprint, but having a lot of stuff he wanted to get out in Spawn and would later explore more in Spawn, kind of start out with Venom, at least some of the ideas. And you can really see that going back now and looking at it. And people don't give credit to the original creator team. Of course, I just mentioned Todd McFarlane, but if you're a fan of Main Spider-Man, you know that McFarlane wasn't the only one responsible for Venom. Of course, you have to throw a lot of love. You have to turn a lot of love toward David Michelini, who I pronounce his name wrong a lot. So David Michelini, however you say it, I'm pretty sure that's correct. It's one of those names I don't hear said out loud a ton. I just read a lot of articles of and read a lot of books with his name on it, because much like a lot of the artists and writers and people in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of creative teams and a lot of writers that got to actually do long-term storytelling arcs. And he was one because he wrote a shit ton of Spider-Man back in the day. So yeah, I think if you haven't read Amazing Spider-Man 300 mainly, or 315, 16, and 17, highly recommend going and check that out. Of course, for fans of the movie or people going into the movie, they've openly talked about Lethal Protector, Planet of Symbiotes, Separation Anxiety. Those are three stories that I would also recommend. They focus on Venom becoming his own anti-hero, going to San Francisco, the Life Foundation, and all that ensues. The symbiotes that are spawned off of Venom, the moments when, especially in Separation Anxiety, when Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote are separated. There are some really cool moments in that where you have the other symbiotes trying to learn from Eddie Brock how to bond better, where you have just so many of these cool moments of Venom, the symbiote, and Eddie Brock, the person, learning how to kind of live in a world without each other and going forward. And backing it up, Lethal Protector, although does still have some really cheesy moments in it, as does Planet of Symbiotes and Separation Anxiety, I do think there's still some real fun to be had there. And if you're a fan of the character, seeing that Life Foundation stuff is kind of important to those early years because they would come back in later stories and later stuff. An interesting one to keep an eye out on, especially with the Morbius movie in the works, is The Enemy Within, a story that features both Venom and Morbius doing a typical 90s crossover, fighting, teaming up, working for another good. It's a story that isn't by any means amazing, but is definitely something worth checking out. Especially with knowing that might be the direction they're planning on going. Who knows with Sony? It's kind of all up in the air, but to stick to the comics, it could possibly be a quick glimpse into the future of what could come. Some more recent run that I know a lot of people have talked about, and a lot of people really do love, including myself, is the Rick Remender run on Venom, where it really heavily focused on Flash Thompson. And for those who don't know, Venom, although associated, the Venom symbiote, although mostly associated with Eddie Brock, has bonded with other people. Not only separation anxiety, he kind of bonds with a lot of people, but you also had him bonding with people like Scorpion for a while and others, and eventually landing with Flash Thompson, who used it more as a super suit after he could no longer fight with his own body, essentially. Having, kind of worshipped heroes and joining the army, becoming a decorated war hero, and find a way to serve his country again, and eventually go off and do some really crazy stuff with the Venom suit. It's a really fun series that, although vastly different from where Venom is today, does give insight more to the Venom symbiote away from Eddie Brock. And while on the stories of kind of them being separated, a great Eddie Brock story that doesn't focus on Venom, the Venom symbiote, is the New Ways to Die storyline from Dan Slott, Romita Jr., where it was the introduction of Anti-Venom. And to me, I think it's the best Eddie Brock story ever, where you can see Eddie Brock diagnosed with cancer, really having a down on his time, trying to become something better, and eventually, due to Mr. Negative, becoming Anti-Venom, literally something that can cure poison, someone that can cure people, and going so far to try to make up for what he feels he's done wrong in the past, and trying to become a new hero, kind of reminiscent of what happened with Venom, but now having a pure good side, a symbiote he can completely control. And they would go on to New Ways to Live, which just focus on Anti-Venom. If you haven't read those, I highly, 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 highly recommend those. They're a very fun read, hold up extremely well. They're not that old, and they're not that hard to find. I know they're on Comixology. The problem with a lot of Venom stuff is, especially right now with the movie, it's so expensive and hard to find for no real reason. I was lucky because I've been reading a lot of these since I was younger and happened to own a lot. Luckily, they reprint a lot of the trades, so you can pick those up. But go back, Comixology, if you can find them for a good price. A lot of these, read them, because I think they're all worth it. And my highest recommendation right now, and it's weird because it's the newest one, but I truly think Donny Cates and Ryan Segman are doing the definitive Venom story right now in the comics. As of recording this, issue 6 came out not too long ago. Issue 7 is pretty soon. You also have the Web of Venom stuff with Vietnam and Carnage Born coming out. So he's doing some incredible things, completely changing the lore of Venom. I was going to say introducing new characters, but he completely changes everything we thought we knew about Venom in the past. So if you're a fan of long time, or if you're brand new, it works either way, because you get to completely see a new status quo. You get to meet characters like Null, this symbiote god. Get to see that, maybe the planet of symbiotes and all this stuff wasn't a planet. Maybe there's not a planet of symbiotes. In fact, there's not. Maybe it's a literal prison holding a god. Fucking seeing these symbiotes going back to all the way to the beginning of time. They're coming really from this evil shadow, being a weapon of Null. Seeing all this devastation he caused. We know now that he killed Nowhere, and learning why the symbiotes are terrified of fire and loud sound, and really getting a completely new take and taste of the character. Venom by Donny Cates and Ryan Segman. Again, we're only, depending on when you're listening to this, it hasn't been coming out that long, But in the first 6 issues alone, the first arc, it redefines and kind of resurrects a character in a complete new light, and it's fantastic. I mean, for me, as a longtime Venom fan, this is kind of the Venom story I dreamed about as a kid. This is when I was a little kid reading stuff like Lethal Protector and Planet of Symbiotes when I was little bitty and could find stuff like that. Because I wasn't when I was little. I mean, those were coming out when I was way too young to read. But when I could read and could find the spare issues, and I would read them, those I would read those, and I remember them being incredible. And going back and reading them, they're still really fun. But the current Venom run is almost a remastering of that kind of character, because now these are as good as I remember the old ones being. These are fantastic. If you are not reading the current Venom series and you're a Venom fan, you're doing yourself a disservice. So go pick them up. All these, pick them up if you can. But I can't recommend that one enough, and that, of course, is easy to get currently because it's coming out right now. So the trade is fixing to come out. You can still get a lot of singles. If you can pick those up, please do yourself a favor and do that. There's so many great stories. There's a lot of spin-off stuff. Things like Carnage Mind Bomb is an extremely dark, twisted tale of Carnage. The Venom versus Carnage stuff. Carnage USA, Maximum Carnage, Minimum Carnage. Carnage had a lot of series. There's been Toxin had some stuff. There's a ton of other symbiote books, but as far as the Venom stories, I do think things like Amazing Spider-Man 300, Separation Anxiety, Planet of Symbiotes, Venom by Rick Remender, Lethal Protector, New Ways to Die, Donny Cates' Venom, and honestly, the Mike Costa Venom stuff before Cates came on is also pretty solid. You should definitely give that a try too if you can. If I'm leaving any out that you guys can think of, please leave a comment below because I would love to read them, because to my knowledge, I've read most, if not all, of the main Venom series, and a lot of spin-offs, and a lot of the character spin-offs because I love the character. But because of how they wrote Venom and put Venom out, you can always find some new hidden gems here or there, weird crossover, the pop-ups from the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff to some of the just weirder aspects that happen throughout. Venom is a very interesting character that I feel like I have a personal connection with because of when I was growing up and what it represented to me then and now. So I love the character, love finding out new stuff about him, and I hope maybe I could tell you one or two stories you haven't heard before or encourage you to go pick them up. No matter what, thank you so much for listening. No matter where you're watching this, listening to this, like, subscribe. Please leave a comment if you liked it. If you didn't like it, tell me what you didn't like. Tell me what you did like. Tell me what your personal favorite Venom story is. Until next time, thank you so much for watching and listening.